Unexplained sadness at another's joy is a message from your unconscious. Freud would say it's a repressed wish, Jung a signal from your shadow. These feelings aren't punishments, they're guides. They point to unmet needs or forgotten dreams. Instead of pushing them away, listen to what they reveal. Your discomfort is a compass, not a curse. The lesson is always about your own path to wholeness. To understand Sigmund Freud's perspective on this curious emotional paradox, we must first journey into his revolutionary model of the human mind. Freud did not see the mind as a peaceful, unified entity. Instead, he depicted it as a dynamic and often tumultuous battlefield, a stage for a relentless internal drama between three powerful psychic forces. He called these forces the id, the ego, and the superego. Each plays a distinct role, and their constant negotiation shapes our every thought, feeling, and action. For Freud, the unexplained sadness that can surface when we witness another person's happiness is a direct consequence of the unresolved conflicts raging within this internal landscape. It is a symptom of a deeper struggle, one that takes place far below the surface of our conscious awareness. At the most primitive level of this psychic structure lies the id. The id is the raw, instinctual core of our personality, present from birth. It operates entirely in the unconscious and is driven by what Freud termed the pleasure principle. It seeks immediate gratification for all our primal urges, needs, and desires, without any regard for reality, logic, or morality. The id is the source of our most basic impulses, our hunger, our aggression, and our libido. It is the demanding, impatient child within us all whispering, "I want it, and I want it now." This force is pure, unadulterated desire, a chaotic energy that constantly pushes for expression, regardless of the consequences. In direct opposition to the id stands the superego. This is the part of our mind that internalizes the moral standards and ideals we acquire from our parents, our community, and society at large. The superego is our inner critic, our conscience striving for perfection and judging our behavior against a rigid set of rules about what is right and wrong. It functions as a kind of moral brake on the impulsive demands of the id, creating feelings of pride when we adhere to its high standards and feelings of guilt and shame when we fall short. The superego represents the voice of authority, constantly telling us what we should and should not do, want, or feel. Caught in the middle of this epic struggle is the ego. The ego is the rational, pragmatic part of our personality that must mediate between the conflicting demands of the instinctual id and the moralistic superego. Operating on the reality principle, the ego's job is to find realistic and socially acceptable ways to satisfy the id's desires without transgressing the superego's moral code. It is the diplomat, the decision-maker, the part of us that navigates the external world. When you feel a pang of sadness at a friend's success, Freud would argue it is because the ego is struggling to manage a desire from the id that the superego has deemed unacceptable, a conflict that has just been violently brought to the surface. Given the constant state of conflict between the id's raw desires and the superego's strict morality, the ego requires a set of tools to maintain order. Freud identified several of these tools, which he called defense mechanisms. Among the most powerful and fundamental of these is repression. Repression is the unconscious process of pushing threatening or painful thoughts, memories, and desires out of our conscious awareness and into the vast, hidden realm of the unconscious. It is not a conscious decision to forget. Rather, it is an automatic protective maneuver performed by the ego to shield us from anxiety and psychic pain. It is like locking away a dangerous prisoner in a deep, dark dungeon of the mind. These repressed desires, however, do not simply disappear once they are locked away. They remain active and potent, constantly seeking an opportunity to escape their psychic prison and return to consciousness. They are like ghosts haunting the corridors of the mind, influencing our moods, dreams, and behaviors in ways we cannot comprehend. A repressed desire for creative recognition, for example, might manifest as a strange, inexplicable aversion to art galleries. A repressed longing for intimacy might surface as a cynical attitude toward romantic relationships. These are the subtle ways the unconscious makes its presence felt, leaking its forbidden contents into our daily lives without revealing its true nature. The act of repression requires an enormous amount of psychic energy. The ego must constantly work to keep the prison door bolted shut, to maintain the barrier between the conscious and the unconscious. This ongoing effort can be incredibly draining, leaving us feeling fatigued, anxious, or emotionally numb without knowing why. The more we repress, the more energy we expend, and the more fragile the barrier becomes. Freud believed that this constant internal pressure is a primary source of neurosis. The symptoms we experience, our anxieties, our phobias, our compulsions, are often compromised formations, distorted expressions of the very desires we have tried so desperately to bury. Therefore, when you feel a sudden wave of sadness upon hearing of a friend's new love, Freud would suggest you're witnessing a momentary failure of repression. Their happiness acts as a key, briefly unlocking the door to your own unseen prison. For a fleeting moment, a repressed desire of your own, a deep-seated wish for love that you may have pushed away due to past heartbreak or fear of rejection, is agitated. The sadness you feel is not for them. It is the sorrow of that imprisoned part of yourself, a poignant reminder of a longing that has been denied the light of day. It is the echo of a desire you told yourself you no longer had. In the Freudian framework, the world around us is, constantly interacting with our inner psychic landscape. External events, especially those with strong emotional resonance, can act as powerful triggers that disturb the delicate balance maintained by the ego. Another person's happiness is a particularly potent trigger because it presents us with a vivid, undeniable image of a desire being fulfilled. When a colleague receives the promotion you secretly coveted, their success is not just an abstract piece of news. It is a real-world manifestation of an ambition that you may have repressed because your superego told you it was too selfish or because you feared the disappointment of failure. Their achievement makes your own hidden wish painfully tangible. This triggering process, you see, bypasses our conscious defenses. You may have constructed a very convincing narrative for yourself about why you do not want that promotion. Perhaps you told yourself you value work-life balance more, or that the added responsibility would be too stressful. This is the story your ego has created to appease your superego and keep the desire from the id safely under wraps. But when you see your colleagues celebrating, the raw emotional reality of the situation breaks through that carefully crafted story. The sight of their joy connects directly with the repressed wish in your unconscious, stirring it from its slumber and causing it to knock against the walls of its prison. The resulting emotion, that sharp pang of sadness, is therefore a form of leakage. It is the psychic pain of your own unfulfilled desire escaping from the unconscious. Freud would see this as a classic example of displacement, another key defense mechanism, since directly acknowledging your envy or disappointment might be too threatening to your self-image. "I'm not an envious person," your superego insists. The psychic energy of that feeling is displaced and converted into a more acceptable, albeit confusing, emotion: sadness. You are not consciously aware that you are sad for yourself, so the feeling appears to be a strange, melancholic reaction to the other person's good fortune. This is why the feeling can be so perplexing. On a conscious level, you genuinely believe you should be happy for the other person. You may even feel a degree of happiness for them. But on an unconscious level, their joy has become a painful mirror reflecting your own lack. It highlights the gap between what they have and what your own ID secretly craves. The sadness is the emotional symptom of this internal contradiction, the poignant awareness of your own unmet wish, a wish so deeply buried that you no longer even knew you had it until that very moment. It is the sorrow of your own forgotten dreams. Ultimately, for Sigmund Freud, the sadness we feel at another's happiness is fundamentally a sadness for ourselves. It is the grief of our own unmet wishes, resurfacing from the depths of the unconscious. This feeling is not a sign of malice or ill will toward the other person. In fact, the other person is almost incidental to the process. They are merely the catalyst, the screen upon which our own internal drama is projected. Their joy serves as an involuntary and often painful reminder of what is absent in our own lives. It highlights the dreams we have abandoned, the ambitions we have suppressed, and the longings we have convinced ourselves we no longer feel. The ache is for our own emotional or existential vacancies. Consider the example of a person who has always dreamed of traveling the world, but has settled into a stable, predictable life due to family pressures or financial fears. They have repressed their wanderlust, telling themselves that they are content with their quiet existence. Then a friend posts photographs from a breathtaking trip to a distant land. The sudden, inexplicable sadness that washes over them is not jealousy of the friend's vacation. It is the mourning of their own forfeited adventure. It is the sorrow of the part of them that yearns for new horizons, a part that has been silenced by the practical demands of the ego and the moral judgments of the superego. Freud's explanation, while perhaps unsettling, is also deeply compassionate. It reframes what feels like a character flaw as a profound human struggle. It suggests that behind our seemingly petty reactions lies a history of personal sacrifice, fear, and disappointment. The sadness is not evidence of our selfishness, but evidence of our sensitivity and our capacity for desire. It reveals that beneath the surface of our carefully managed lives there are still parts of us that dream, hope, and long for more. It is a testament to the enduring power of our deepest, most authentic wishes, even after we have tried our best to extinguish them. Therefore, the Freudian approach encourages us to treat this sadness not with shame, but with curiosity. It invites us to ask ourselves a difficult but crucial question. What unmet wish within me has this person's happiness just awakened? By daring to look at the source of the sadness, we can begin the work of psychoanalysis to make the unconscious conscious. This process allows us to understand our true desires, to grieve for what has been lost, and perhaps to find new and healthier ways to integrate these powerful, repressed parts of ourselves into our conscious lives, freeing the psychic energy that was once used to keep them imprisoned. While Sigmund Freud saw our inner world as a battlefield of repressed desires, his brilliant student Carl Jung offered a different and profoundly mystical map of the human psyche. Jung moved beyond the idea of simple repression and introduced a more holistic concept he called the shadow. For Jung, the shadow is not merely a collection of forbidden sexual or aggressive instincts. Instead, it is the entirety of our unconscious personality, the other side of our conscious ego. It is the dark, unseen part of ourselves that contains everything we have failed to acknowledge, both the good and the bad. It is the person we would rather not be, and so we push it into darkness. The shadow is born from our attempts to create an acceptable and admirable persona for the outside world. From a young age, we learn that certain qualities are praised while others are punished or shamed. If we are taught that being sensitive is a weakness, we might strive to be tough and resilient, banishing our tenderness to the shadow. If we are told that ambition is selfish, we might cultivate an attitude of humility, casting our drive and desire for success into the psychic gloom. The shadow, therefore, becomes a vast, hidden repository for all the parts of our full humanity that we have deemed unacceptable, inconvenient, or unworthy of being part of our conscious identity. It is our psychic twin living in exile. Unlike Freud's id, which he saw as purely primitive, Jung believed the shadow was not necessarily evil or negative. It simply is. It contains our undeveloped, unlived, and disowned potential. Within the shadow, we might find not only our greed and our rage, but also our hidden creativity, our repressed spontaneity, and our buried strengths. A person who prides themselves on being logical and organized may have a wonderfully chaotic and artistic shadow. A person who identifies as a meek people-pleaser might have a powerful and assertive shadow. The shadow is not an enemy to be vanquished. It is a vital part of ourselves that holds the key to our own wholeness. To encounter the shadow, Jung believed, is an essential and unavoidable part of the journey towards self-realization, a process he called individuation. This journey requires us to turn away from the bright, sunlit world of our conscious ego and venture into the darkness of our own unconscious. It means facing the parts of ourselves we have spent a lifetime denying. This is a difficult and often painful moral challenge. When we feel that strange sadness at another's joy, Jung would say we are not just feeling a repressed wish, we are standing at the edge of our own shadow, and it is beckoning us to look within and discover what vital part of our own soul we have left behind. The process of forming a conscious personality, our ego, is largely a process of selection and rejection. We choose which traits to cultivate and present to the world and which to discard. The discarded traits do not simply vanish, they fall into the unconscious and become the building blocks of our shadow. If our family and culture value kindness and cooperation above all else, our natural aggression, our competitive spirit, and our healthy anger might be deemed unacceptable. To fit in and be loved, we learn to suppress these qualities. We push them out of sight, constructing an ego persona that is agreeable and gentle, while our capacity for righteous anger and self-assertion languishes in the darkness of the shadow. This disowning of our own qualities is a subtle but powerful form of self-mutilation. In our effort to be good or strong or rational, we sever ourselves from the full spectrum of our human nature. We create a one-sided personality that is predictable and socially acceptable but ultimately incomplete. A person who identifies solely with their intellect and logic might disown their emotional depth, viewing feelings as messy and unreliable. They may become cold and detached, unable to connect authentically with others or with their own heart. Their emotional life, rich with potential for connection and wisdom, is relegated to the shadow, where it remains undeveloped and misunderstood. The great irony, according to Jung, is that the more we deny a part of ourselves, the more power it gains over us in the unconscious. A disowned quality does not lie dormant. It becomes autonomous and often works against our conscious intentions. The person who denies their own need for dependency might find themselves inexplicably drawn into relationships where they are forced to be cared for. The individual who disowns their own laziness might suffer from chronic procrastination or burnout, as their shadow forces them to rest in destructive ways. The shadow seeks balance. If our conscious life is too one-sided, the shadow will erupt in unexpected ways to restore equilibrium. Therefore, the shadow is not just a passive container of unwanted traits. It is an active and dynamic part of our psyche that constantly seeks expression and integration. It holds the very qualities we need to become more balanced, whole, and authentic individuals. The gentle person needs access to their shadow's strength to set boundaries. The overly rational person needs access to their shadow's emotion to experience love and intimacy. The disciplined individual needs their shadow's spontaneity to experience joy and play. Jung taught that true psychological health lies not in perfecting our ego, but in having the courage to embrace the totality of who we are, including the parts we once deemed unworthy. Because the contents of the shadow are unconscious, we cannot see them directly in ourselves. Our ego is designed to protect us from the discomfort of acknowledging these disowned traits. So, how does the shadow make itself known? Jung's answer is profound and has far-reaching implications for all our relationships. We experience our shadow through the psychological mechanism of projection. Projection is the unconscious act of attributing our own unacknowledged qualities, both positive and negative, onto other people. We do not see others as they are, we see them through the lens of our own hidden self. The world becomes a mirror reflecting back the parts of our psyche we cannot face. This is why we sometimes have intensely irrational emotional reactions to other people. The person at work who irritates you beyond all reason may be carrying a projection of a quality you deny in yourself. Perhaps their perceived arrogance is a reflection of your own repressed ambition. Your intense annoyance is the energy of your own shadow being activated. You are not just reacting to them, you are reacting to a disowned part of yourself that you see in them. As Jung famously wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The irritation is a clue, pointing directly to a piece of your own shadow that is ripe for integration. Projection is not limited to negative qualities. We can also project our positive, undeveloped potential onto others. A phenomenon Jung called positive shadow projection. This often happens when we admire or idolize someone. The incredible creativity you see in an artist, the inspiring courage you see in an activist, or the profound wisdom you see in a mentor might be projections of your own dormant creativity, courage, and wisdom. You are seeing your own golden potential mirrored in them. This is why we can feel so drawn to certain people. They embody the very best parts of ourselves that we have not yet dared to claim as our own. They represent our own unlived life. Understanding projection is a revolutionary step in self-awareness. It allows us to withdraw our hooks from other people and realize that our strong emotional reactions, both positive and negative, are primarily about us. When you feel an intense emotion towards someone, the Jungian approach is to ask, what quality in this person am I reacting to so strongly? And where does this quality exist, unacknowledged within me? This practice transforms every relationship and every interaction into an opportunity for self-discovery. It shifts the focus from blaming or idolizing others to exploring the vast, uncharted territory of our own soul. Now we can understand Jung's perspective on why another person's happiness can make us sad. When we witness someone else experiencing a joy that we secretly long for but have denied ourselves, it is our shadow that is stirred. The other person's success or happiness becomes a screen upon which we project a disowned part of our own potential. Their joy does not just trigger a repressed wish, as Freud might say, it illuminates an entire aspect of our own being that we have exiled to the shadow. The sadness we feel is the sorrow of our own unrealized self, the grief for a part of our own life that has gone unlived. Imagine a woman who has built her identity around being a dedicated professional, priding herself on her independence and career achievements. In doing so, she may have pushed her desire for a deep, committed romantic partnership into her shadow, viewing it as a distraction or a vulnerability. When her close friend announces a joyful engagement, the happiness shines a powerful light on that disowned part of herself. The friend's joy becomes a living symbol of the love and connection that her own shadow self yearns for. The sadness that emerges is the voice of her shadow whispering, "Look, this too is a part of life you desire. This too is a part of you." This perspective transforms the feeling of sadness from something shameful into something sacred. It is not petty envy, it is a profound communication from the soul. It is a signal that our conscious life has become too narrow, too one-sided, and that a vital part of our personality is clamoring for attention. The other person's happiness serves as a messenger, bringing news from the lost continent of our own psyche. It reveals a deep truth. You are more than your conscious ego. You are also the person you have not yet become, and that person is calling to you from the depths of your own being. Jung would encourage us not to turn away from this sadness, but to sit with it, to honor it, and to listen to its message. The key question to ask is not, why am I so envious? But what beautiful and necessary part of my own life is this person's joy reminding me of? By asking this question, we begin the sacred work of turning toward the shadow. We start to acknowledge the longings we have denied and the potential we have ignored. The sadness, then, is not an end point. It is a doorway. It is the beginning of a journey to reclaim the disowned parts of ourselves and move toward a more complete and authentic existence.